for having me. Indeed, my name is Alexander Zack. I'm originally from Germany. I got my training in Germany, but I'm indeed in the Netherlands now for more than 20 years. And I'm a professor of brain stimulation and applied cognitive neuroscience at Maastricht University in the Netherlands. And today I would like to spend 45 minutes to tell you something about non-invasive neuromodulation technologies, non-invasive brain stimulation technologies, and how they can be used not only for research, but also for clinical treatment in the field of psychiatry, but also neurology and neurorehabilitation. This is where I'm located in Maastricht. It's a small town in the Netherlands, a small country. In Europe, this is our university health campus. We have the academic hospital with the different departments that we are associated with, psychiatry, neurology, and neurorehabilitation. And we also have a cognitive neuroscience department at a Maastricht Brain Imaging Center where we do fundamental research in healthy volunteers, in vitro cell cultures, on all sorts of levels to understand the human brain, but also to understand and improve neurotechnologies. One of those new neurotechnologies is TMS, Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation, that you probably have heard of already. It's a non-invasive neuromodulation or brain stimulation technique. Whenever you hear transcranial in front of a technology, you get the message already that it's non-invasive, because transcranial literally means through the intact skull. And TMS, as the name reveals, means that we are using magnetic pulses, magnetic fields to transcranially stimulate the brain. It was invented a long time ago in the 1980s, so it's not really a new technology at all. It's quite old. And it was invented by accident by a team in Sheffield in the United Kingdom, engineers that actually aimed to develop a peripheral nerve stimulator. Peripheral nerves are usually stimulated with electric current, and they thought maybe we can use that with magnetic fields. It's less painful, it goes deeper into the tissue, and that was the whole goal of that prototype. But then and it's a great story that you should really listen to by the inventor of TMS himself, Professor Anthony Barker, which I had the pleasure to interview in a series of talks I had with him, and that are freely available for you to watch back if you are interested in how it all started and what he thinks about the field today. Then please go to brainstimulation-academy.com and watch those 3 interviews that I had with Anthony about the invention of TMS. And there he tells much nicer than I could ever do how it all started, and that it was not meant as a brain stimulation device at all. But then he had that light bulb moment when he heard about the work from a colleague in London who was doing brain surgery, and at the awake brain surgery, they would test the functional relevance of certain brain areas before surgery with electric current. And then the team of Barker realized immediately, well, in principle, our magnetic stimulator could also pass through the skull of the head and stimulate not the peripheral nerves, but the central nervous system, the brain, directly. And then they wrote a letter to London and asked whether they could come by with the device, and they did. And then in London, immediately, the neurology department put the coil on their head and stimulated their motor cortex and saw twitches from the stimulation activating their muscles. And everybody was very excited, and people literally lined up to get their brains zapped by that new machine, and the rest is really history. But again, check out Brain Stimulation-Academy if you're interested in the whole story. This is Anthony Barker back then on the left side, and this is Anthony Barker on the right side today when I had my interviews with him. TMS is a very simple technology. In essence, if you have such a device, you know that it consists of a stimulator or a main device that is, in essence, a bank of capacitor, which discharges a strong current through a cable into a coil. The coil is an electromagnetic coil. In essence, it's copper wire, where the current runs through the copper wire. This is a plastic housing around this copper wire. So this is the TMS coil, the electromagnetic coil that is attached to a stimulator, and then a very strong current runs through that coil. If you press a button, you close a switch and the current runs through that coil. And because it's a moving current, you get a magnetic field according to Faraday's law or the Maxwell-Faraday equation. You get the electric current in the coil generates a magnetic field. And as we know from physics, any magnetic field can interact with an electric circuit to generate an electromotive force. And in terms of TMS, that means that our TMS pulse is the magnetic field that is generated by the current that we apply. This magnetic field interacts with the electric circuit, which is our brain, because it is exposed to a magnetic field, and it generates an electromotive force, which is the electric field that is then induced in the brain via this magnetic field that we apply. And this electric field has a gradient, a voltage difference, and therefore an electromotive force causes currents to flow, causes neurons to fire. We make neurons fire by this electromagnetic induction. And if you want to be a bit more precise, you have the Maxwell-Faraday equation that tells us that if you want to induce a spatially varying electric field in the brain, we need to have a magnetic field that is changing over time. And therefore, the magnetic field that we apply with TMS is not a static magnetic field like in an MRI scanner, but it's a very fast, time-changing, time-varying magnetic field. And this is why we call it a magnetic pulse. It is built up very quickly, and it also decays very, very quickly. It usually takes less than 1 millisecond to apply a very fast changing magnetic pulse. And if you do that, here you see it on the right side, a TMS coil is positioned on the outside, on the scalp of a patient's head. We then apply those magnetic pulses into the brain, and because they are changing rapidly over time, they will induce electric fields in the brain, and those will stimulate the underlying neurons, triggering action potentials. So literally, if you place it on the right, on a certain part of your motor cortex that represents, for example, your hand, and you activate it, your hand will start to move via the stimulation. That's transcranial magnetic stimulation. We also have other forms of transcranial neurotechnologies, for example, TES, transcranial electric stimulation, which, as the name again reveals, is transcranial. So we go through the intact skull, but now we don't use magnetic pulses. We use just a very low intensity electric current that runs between a couple of electrodes that are, for example, integrated in such a headset, which are now available wirelessly even. And so you put it on, and then there's current flowing between electrodes, and they can also induce changes in the underlying neural populations. So again, transcranially stimulating or modulating brain activity, network activity, all non-invasively, and with great effects on various levels. But now I would like to focus on TMS and what can be done with it. So in basic research, what we often do is we need to have an idea where we place the TMS coil to know what kind of brain structures we stimulate. And to do that, in our research at least, we usually start with a neuroimaging measurement where we identify in a given patient or subject the area that is active while the patient or subject is executing a certain function. In this demonstration movie, for example, just as an example, this person is tapping the right index finger, and then we use the MRI and fMRI analysis to identify in this person's brain which area of the brain is active during the execution of that finger tapping, and we can easily identify this in the primary motor cortex of this person. And then in the next step, the same person is in my TMS lab, and I use a so-called fMRI-guided TMS neural navigation system, which is a camera system that tracks the movement of the head and the coil and brings it all in the same coordinate system as the reconstruction of the head and the reconstruction of the brain of that very patient. And then when I move the coil across the head, I get a software telling me which part of the brain will I now target, will I now stimulate if I give a pulse. And then I just have to neuronavigate to the area that I have identified in this person to be active in this particular context when she's tapping the index finger. So you see me holding the coil, I'm moving it across her head, and I'm trying to get this red beam, which is the peak of the magnetic pulse, to target this activity in her brain. And every click sound is a magnetic pulse I apply to her brain painlessly. And when I do that, I make her finger move now beyond her control, because I'm activating the area that is controlling this finger movement. It's just a demonstration how that fMRI-guided TMS principle works, but the same idea, of course, then translates to other areas, to other applications. So you can stimulate areas, but you can also disrupt certain areas with using frequencies that interfere with ongoing brain activity. Here's an example again.
I'm Roger Highfield. I'm the science editor of the Daily Telegraph. Now, words mean everything to me, but now I'm going to have the speech area of my brain turned off with a giant magnet.
So now the speech area is targeted, and while this person is speaking,
Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall.
Interfering pulses will be applied.
All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again.
So these were just two simple examples of what TMS can do. This is another example from our lab.
Please come and visit the tomb. Maastricht is a very great town. Please come and visit it soon. Maastricht is a very great town. Please come and visit it soon.
You get the idea. So you have a very simple non-invasive technique. You can position it based on individual MRI or fMRI data to know where you're stimulating. You can use different parameters to stimulate or interfere with ongoing activity, and the effects are immediate, and they're also gone directly when you stop the stimulation. And all of this makes it a wonderful research tool to study the human brain and understand what area is relevant for what function. And that's what we do a lot. But what might interest you even more, and what is the reason why I'm here probably, or why many people are interested in TMS nowadays with a clinical interest, is that we have now protocols available where we know that TMS doesn't only have immediate effects, online effects, but we can apply certain protocols of TMS, usually called repetitive TMS protocols or RTMS, which means that we apply not a couple of pulses, but literally hundreds of thousands of pulses with a certain frequency in many, many sessions over a course of a treatment cycle. And this leads to neuroplastic changes in the brain that are lasting. So TMS is a method to induce neuroplasticity changes in the brain, in networks of the brain. We can modulate those networks that we target. We can make them more or less active than before. We can strengthen connections. We can weaken connections depending on the protocol that we use. And those effects that we induce, those neuroplastic effects, they are lasting beyond the stimulation itself. And this, of course, opens the door of TMS being not only an interesting research tool, but a potential clinical therapy for patients suffering from disorders in psychiatry, neurology, or rehabilitation that are characterized by a pathological network pattern of activity, where we can maybe try to counteract the pathological changes caused by the disease. That is exactly the rationale behind RTMS therapies. In essence, TMS is such a versatile tool for clinical therapy that is discussed in the context of so many disorders, not because TMS is the magic bullet or a wonder miracle therapy, that can do everything. That's not true. It is so versatile because we have the opportunity to target different networks in the brain by just positioning the coil at different areas. So you do something completely different if you want to treat depression or you want to treat neuropathic pain. You stimulate different networks. That makes it very flexible and versatile. And we have different protocols from which we know that they induce different kinds of neuroplasticity, long-term depression, long-term potentiation, modulating functional connectivity within networks. So all of this gives us another level of flexibility to use the same technology to address very different diseases. And because of the success story of TMS in treating many diseases, and some of those success stories are not even, let's say, off-label anymore or research, they are absolutely recognized, established, and regulatory approved, even health insurance covered therapies nowadays. There is a lot of interest in TMS, and there's a lot of money in TMS, and there are a lot of companies now entering the market to offer TMS devices, TMS solutions that can help you in your clinical practice. And in a way, they differ, but for the sake of my talk, we ignore that because in essence, of course, they all do the same thing. And what they do has really, let's say, revolutionized many fields of psychiatry and neurology, because after the first FDA approval of a TMS therapy, in this case for depression in 2008 or 8, there has been a long, and it's continuing, a long list of developments where different systems were FDA cleared, FDA approved, CE cleared, CE approved for different disorders. And at least in the Netherlands, and I know in many other countries in Europe and in the US and in Canada and Australia, there is now such an acceptance of TMS that it is effective, that also it is often reimbursed by public health insurances. That's, for example, the case in the Netherlands where I work. I was part of a committee that had to provide the evidence, and we were successful. So in the Netherlands, and again in many other countries, patients can have TMS treatment for treatment-resistant depression, and it's all covered by the public health insurance, which is, of course, great. And I hope that this becomes a standard in many, many other countries. So let's start with depression. How does it work? Why do we do that? Depression, as you probably know, if you have a background in psychiatry, is by far the most prevalent mental disorder. I think by now it's around 300 million people worldwide suffering from depression. There are, of course, many opportunities to treat depression, of course, with antidepressants, so with medication. They can be very effective. Their psychotherapy can be very effective. But as you may know, even if you try those, let's say, first line of treatments, medication, psychotherapy, there's still a large percentage of depressed patients that do not benefit from any of those available treatments. They are so-called treatment-resistant patients, or difficult to treat depression patients. It's more than a third, at least. There are even other estimates recently that say the number is even much higher. And they try everything, they try different drugs, and nothing really helps. So there's clearly a need of new solutions for those treatment-resistant patients that go beyond the now available pharmacotherapy. And the research that has looked into that has, in the beginning, assumed and identified in depressed patients a sort of network imbalance between the left and the right prefrontal cortex. We now know that this assumption is probably wrong or definitely oversimplified, but that's how it got started. And what we now know is that those prefrontal areas that we can target with TMS in either in the left or right hemisphere, they are more or less our entry window to deeper lying structures that we cannot directly target with TMS, because TMS has the limitation that is the magnetic pulse that we apply decays very quickly in strength. It decays logarithmically with distance. So it means after a few centimeters, it's quite weak and will not stimulate anything anymore. So what we need and what we do is we need a cortical target that's quite superficial on the cortex to stimulate this cortical region, for example, those dorsolateral prefrontal areas, and then use those as an entry into deeper lying connected areas. And in depression, we are now have a lot of data on this connection between the DLPFC, which is the main target for depression, and the subgenuine anterior cingulate cortex. And this seems to be pathologically, this communication seems to be pathologically altered in treatment-resistant depression. And if you use TMS to successfully modulate this connection using your TMS treatment, then this correlates also with clinical improvement in those treatment-resistant patients. And this is what's done now and has been shown and in many clinical randomized controlled placebo-controlled trials. So this is without a question an effective therapy, and we now even have different protocols available for different patient subgroups of depression that are all proven to be clinically effective. They all target the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, some of them the right hemisphere, some of them the left hemisphere. Some of those protocols use a high frequency protocol on the left, others use a low frequency RTMS protocol on the right. A recent development includes protocols that are called theta burst stimulation, which means that this is a protocol that has been shown to can have similar neuroplastic effects than the classical RTMS protocols we started out with, but they need a much shorter treatment duration. To give you a number, a classical depression RTMS session using RTMS would take around 20 minutes to administer. So the patient comes in and gets like a 20-minute TMS session per day and has to come back 5 times a week for 6 weeks, so get 30 sessions in total. This is a standard and still quite accepted TMS depression therapy. And the theta burst protocol can do the same trick in 3 minutes. So it's a 3-minute protocol that the patient has to go through, and then again 30 sessions to finalize this treatment. We have also looked at combining TMS with other interventions. This is, for example, a study on 200 patients where we combined TMS online with a psychotherapy session. And you see here below the response and remission rates that we report. These are a bit higher than normal, but in principle, if you would like to have an indication, the large clinical trials that show or look at the efficacy of TMS for treating depression in treatment-resistant patients have a remission rate of around 40%, 40-50% sometimes. But again, please remember those are treatment-resistant patients, so these numbers are actually quite good and quite impressive. I already mentioned this, like the most recent idea about the mechanism, why it works in depression, is that there is this network, this connection between the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and the subgenuine anterior cingulate cortex that seems to be relevant in depression and altered in depressed patients, and that can be modulated with TMS if you target the DLPFC with the protocols I just mentioned. And because of this, a group in Stanford a few years ago had, they didn't have the idea had someone else, but they came up with a protocol that combined a couple of new ways of doing it. And one way was to, instead of placing the TMS coil on the same DLPFC depression target in every patient the same way, one size fits all, instead of doing that, they said, why don't we turn it around and we start with a functional connectivity scan of each of our depression patients, and then identify in each individual patient the exact target on the scalp that we need to stimulate in order to have the best connection to the subgenuine anterior cingulate cortex. So we do first a seed-based functional connectivity analysis, it's called, that gives us, starting, like reverse engineering. We start from the anterior cingulate cortex that we cannot reach, and we tell the software after an fMRI scan, okay, this is our actual target, and now show us a functional connectivity map that includes our entry within the prefrontal cortex that is the best way to get there. Is the best correlated or anti-correlated spot, and we place our TMS coil there. This is what they did. They did two other things to innovate depression therapy. They used the theta burst protocol I just told you, the 3-minute one, but they made it a bit longer. They made it 9 minutes, still rather short. And they thought, well, why does the patient that comes to the clinic just gets one session and then goes home and comes back the next day for the second session and so forth? It takes a long time. Why don't we offer more sessions in one visit? It's called accelerated TMS. And in this extreme case, they offer 10 sessions in one day. So patients come in on Monday and gets this personalized positioning and gets a theta burst 9-minute treatment, and then has a break of 50 minutes to walk around the hospital, have a coffee, whatever, then comes back, gets a second session, and then you repeat this until you finish 10 sessions. So it's a very long day for the nurses and for the patient, morning till evening, 10 TMS sessions. The good thing is you do that 5 days in a row. That means after 5 days, if you count correctly, you have 50 sessions finished. That's much more than the normal depression therapy that can do in 6 weeks. And that's why they also finish after 5 days. And that is the great, let's say, advantage of that Stanford Accelerated Intelligent or SAINT neuromodulation protocol. It offers depression TMS therapy in 5 days rather than 6 weeks. And it is also now FDA approved and has really taken off, especially in the US. And we also, in our clinic in Maastricht, we are running now a clinical trial to compare that Stanford approach with a standard approach to see, is that really similar in terms of clinical efficacy and, of course, with an eye on cost effectiveness. Interestingly, after this became, let's say, available and has been marketed, some colleagues of mine, including myself, were wondering, okay, it's great, it's a perfect that we have a five-day therapy now available for depression, so much faster results. From a scientific point of view, it's a bit of a shame that this SAINT protocol changed so many things at once that we don't know for sure scientifically which of these ingredients of that protocol are really needed and which are not needed. For example, I told you this fMRI guided positioning based on connectivity creates quite some complexity and makes the whole thing less accessible and expensive. And it's quite unclear at the moment whether this part is really needed. Maybe the 10 sessions a day is all you need. Maybe this is causing these good results that they had, like this high remission rates after five days. Maybe it was not needed to position the coil so individually as they did. But we never know because they did both of these things at the same time. So that's why, let's say, very recently now, people start to play with that a little bit. And there was a recent publication of a group that called it the Pragmatic Saint, which I like. So they did everything the same, but they modified a few things. Instead of 50 sessions, 10 sessions a day for 5 days, they did 36 sessions. So on Monday, 6 sessions, Tuesday, 8 sessions, Wednesday, 8 sessions, Thursday, 8 sessions, Friday, 6 sessions, so 36 in 5 days, so a bit less. And they didn't position the coil using this fMRI guided functional connectivity based positioning, complex, expensive, but they just did a very simple one size fits all positioning. It's called the BMF3. It's like the standard that every clinic uses, that every private practitioner can use with a measuring tape. So it's extremely low tech. It's extremely easy and cheap to do. And most clinics have done it before SAINT like that successfully. So they just did that. And ignored this fancy part of SAINT, and they reported in an let's say preliminary study with 20 patients only, but they reported similar good results similar to that same protocol. Also after 5 days, 5 days, very good response and remission in those patients using this more pragmatic approach. This is just for you to realize that this is an ongoing debate, discussion. How can we make it better, but also keep it simple enough so that actual clinicians, private practitioners, psychiatrists in their own private practice can still, in principle, offer TMS as a therapy to their patients. The only thing they would need is a device and the protocol, but not more than that. And I think this, the reason why TMS has been so successful clinically is also because it is relatively simple and can be done also in the context of a private practice and not an academic hospital only. This was the depression example, but this is just to give you a bit of an overview. In the field of psychiatry, there are much more indications where TMS is investigated and where TMS has been actually shown to be clinically effective. So depression is the prime example, and it has level A evidence. It's regulatory approved, and it's reimbursed even by many insurances in many countries, but also PTSD, OCD is a big trial now in the Netherlands, and there is also OCD FDA approval for some of the solutions. Addiction, negative symptoms of schizophrenia, and many more. And this is like the level of evidence based on a consensus and guideline paper that was published by many colleagues in the field. When it comes to psychiatry, and they did the same exercise for neurology and rehabilitation. As you can see here, also in that discipline, there's quite some indications for clinical efficacy, and some of those are beyond indications. They're actually proven to be clinically effective, and that is using TMS for neuropathic pain, but also for motor stroke rehabilitation. Level B is for fibromyalgia, aphasia, and level C, which is still good for Alzheimer's disease, epilepsy, hemispatial neglect. And this is a categorization that's also now almost 5 years old. We are now working on an update of this, and because the evidence and the number of studies that provided data for these and other indications has only increased, I expect that those tables will look even better, with some of the now level B and C indications moving up to A, and other diseases might be new on that table. The final few minutes, I would like to give an example of a clinical application of TMS in the field of neurology. It's also a nice example from our own lab where we did something, let's say, basic research using TMS in healthy volunteers, in our students, to test things, to study how the brain works, and that led to results and findings and to protocols that we then realized has clinical potential, and then we tested it in the patients, and that led to a new therapy. And I'm talking about our interest in cognitive functions and how they are represented in the brain, and in this particular case, attention, spatial attention. So our ability to shift and control our attention in space, to shift between different locations as a top-down attentional process. And we have identified with 20 years of research, we and many other colleagues, the networks, the dorsal attention network, so a particular network, a frontoparietal network in the brain that is relevant or is activated when you shift and control your attention in space. And we have also used EEG to look at the brain rhythms, the oscillations within that network that correlate with shifting your attention. And to make a complex story very simple, within that network, within that frontoparietal network, if you shift your attention to the right side of fixation, so you fixate somewhere, but then you voluntarily top-down want to shift your attention to the right side because you want to focus and select on something on the right, then your alpha power, so the magnitude of your alpha brain rhythm between 8 and 12 hertz, will change between the two hemispheres. It will increase in the right hemisphere and decrease in the left when your attention is on the right. And when your attention shifts to the left side, this will reverse. So now the lateralization of alpha is in the other direction. It's high in the left and low in the right. This is what we see in a healthy brain. You can measure when you ask people to shift their attention. Now we had the idea, can we use non-invasive brain stimulation, in this case not TMS, but a neurotechnology called TACS, transcranial alternating current stimulation, to modulate those rhythmic brain activity, those oscillations in the network. So unlike everything I told you so far, and with TMS, where we kind of change activity levels, we make an area more active or less active, or we modulate the connection within a network. Now we actually want to change the rhythm, the oscillations. It's called entrainment. We want to entrain rhythms. And we use this TACS technology, which is just a couple of electrodes. This is an experimental setting in a lab. Couple of electrodes where we have a low current running between the two electrodes, but the current is alternating between those electrodes. So that's why it's transcranial alternating current stimulation. And it alternates with a specific frequency that you decide. And then you can stimulate with a frequency, and then you can entrain this frequency on the brain. So I make the neurons underneath those electrodes rhythmically fire in the same rhythm that I apply the TACS stimulation with. So we did that, and we did that based on the individual alpha frequency. So we first used EEG in every patient to identify what is your individual personal alpha frequency, because it's different from person to person. Someone might have an 8.9 Hertz alpha frequency, someone might have a 10.1 alpha frequency. So it's the individual alpha frequency, IIF, that you can identify with EEG, which we did. And then we used those individual alpha frequencies in the TACS intervention to experimentally increase the alpha power in the left hemisphere compared to the right. And then we had a couple of control conditions to see whether, whatever effect we get is specific to that experimental idea to change the individual alpha frequency or to make it stronger in one of the two hemispheres. And we used EEG before and after our TACS to validate that we were successful, and we were. So these are the EEG results showing that indeed only the individual alpha frequency condition and not any other control condition was able to shift the balance between the strength of this alpha rhythm to the left hemisphere, where we also positioned the TACS electrodes. This is what we wanted. And interestingly, that had immediate cognitive effects on our students, healthy volunteers, namely, in accordance with what you would expect from the literature and our previous findings, when we made those alpha rhythms in the left hemisphere stronger using neuromodulation, those subjects were better cognitively enhanced in being able to shift and control their attention to the left side of space. So we made them better in their ability to control their attention to the left. Specifically, this function was enhanced, cognitively enhanced in those healthy volunteers via this alpha-based TACS intervention. And that immediately after we've published this led to a clinical idea, namely to use it as a new treatment for the cognitive rehabilitation of stroke patients that suffer from left hemi-neglect. Here's a short clip demonstrating that. So he's not responding to the left because he's not attending to it. Now he sees it because it's in the center. The right one he sees anyhow. But when they compete for attention because they go at the same time, like now, he only reports the right one. He has left extinction or left neglect even. And those patients usually either have, recover spontaneously from neglect. That sometimes happens. But right hemispheric stroke patients with a left neglect have a have a bad prognosis when it comes to the spontaneous recovery of neglect. There's not much you can do from a therapeutic point of view. And once they are chronic neglect, at least here in the Netherlands, I don't know about Ukraine, but there's literally nothing we can do. They are discharged from the rehabilitation center. They go back to their private homes, and they're more or less told that they need to learn how to cope with a deficit. And the general prognosis for general cognitive rehabilitation is also quite bad if the neglect persists. And those chronic stroke patients, those chronic neglect patients, we visited in their private home, and we offered this new therapy that we developed, which is this alpha-based TACS to the left hemisphere to entrain those rhythmic alpha balances in favoring their ability to again have attention control over the left hemifield. And this is the placebo-controlled trial that we run and was published recently. And you see that in this chronic patients, immediately when starting this therapy, you see a significant improvement compared to the placebo group in neglect scales, but also in other tasks, cognitive tasks, classical neuropsychological assessments. And those improvements lasted even after we finished our stimulation, which was, I think, for 18 sessions over a couple of weeks. And we followed those patients up to 150 days, and you can see that this positive effect of the therapy remained until our very last follow-up assessment. So very, very promising, and something that was quite a difference for these patients that were in a chronic state. So you had an example from the field of psychiatry, which is depression, an example from the field of neurology or neurorehabilitation, which is stroke rehab. You saw the tables of all the other disorders. I had no time to go into what's going on and what is the clinical evidence. And you see that it's extremely versatile and a highly dynamic field. And I would like to finish, therefore, with indicating to you that me and many other colleagues from the scientific and clinical and academic community of non-invasive brain stimulation have many years ago founded the Academy of Brain Stimulation. And again, it's the same webpage where you have the free interviews with Anthony Barker. Is brainstimulation-academy.com. Please check it out. And we also have a LinkedIn initiative. On LinkedIn, it's the International Clinical TMS Certification course, which we now also offer from the Academy of Brain Stimulation. These are official courses that certify you to be a TMS prescriber or TMS technician if you're interested to use TMS clinically. So we are training many clinicians and nurses and technicians from all over the world in those international clinical TMS certification courses that are offered at different locations throughout the world, also online. And even now, very recently, we have an accreditation for an on-demand TMS certification course that you literally can follow digitally on our web page by signing in and streaming the lectures, and then having a live online practical session with one of our academy experts that walk you through how to operate a TMS device after you purchased one. So all of this is for you to consider if you are interested in the clinical application. The LinkedIn page is definitely something to maybe have an eye on and just follow us, because it's completely free of charge, obviously. And what we do there is we try to, with a big team, scan the vast amount of articles that come out every week in the field of TMS, TDCS, TACS, and we try to pick the ones that we find relevant also clinically, and then make a post and summarize the main message and provide open access to the full article if you're interested. So if you're on LinkedIn, I highly recommend to just follow us there, because that's a very simple entry level if you want to be more formally trained and certified in TMS therapy, then consider following one of those courses of the Academy of Brain Stimulation. Here it is. This is the course site of the TMS courses that you can check out if you like. We have upcoming courses in London and in Hong Kong, but we also have courses in Amsterdam and elsewhere. I actually forgot. And the Brain Stimulation Academy now offers also the possibility, if you don't want to follow a course yet, or you have already followed a course and you want to stay in contact, you can become a full member of the Academy of Brain Stimulation, where you just sign up and become a member, and you have various benefits as a member. For me, the nicest thing of being a member is that I'm part of this global community of TMS professionals. So the idea was really to link or to bridge the gap between scientists of TMS, academics, researchers, developers, and the clinical practitioners that are maybe not in an academic hospital, they are maybe not on those conferences, and they need to be linked and informed about those developments, and stay within the in the loop. And being a member also means that you are connected to all of these people. And there's, for example, a Slack community channel where it's really nice to see how, like, a private practitioner in Cyprus has a question about a patient, and there are many colleagues worldwide, including famous TMS researchers that can help and comment and support. So that is a very nice thing to be part of. And as a chairing the Academy of Brain Stimulation at the moment, I have the privilege to also be able to offer a discount code for those interested to join the Academy as a member. So if you sign up and you use that code, you get a significant reduction in that membership fee, which I have no idea what it is at the moment, but yeah, just for you to consider. And with this, I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah. So thank you so much, sir, for this insightful session. It was very good. And I like your work that you are trying to decrease the cost of this therapy, because in IVANO-FRANKIVSK there is one center and it was very costly. And nowadays it was most needed here in Ukraine. And I have some personal questions from you. I will ask question. I have some questions about the patients. But first I will ask if anyone has some questions, so they can ask, free to ask. Anyone have a question? Anyone?
We want to say how we're grateful for the opportunity to learn from you, and of course we are looking forward to fruitful collaboration with you. Maybe in future we will be happy to see you at our MedSynergy conference in November, and of course we will send you a certificate by email for this lecture. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thanks, Alina. I think anyone more have to say?
Good evening. Thank you, Doctor, for this presentation. Could you be kind to share again the link, that code, the discount code, please? Thank you.
Yes, of course. Maybe I can send it. I can put it in the chat. Maybe, is that a good idea?
Yes, in the chat there are a lot of thanks message there. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, let's see how I do that. Where's the chat? I can't find chat function. I'm sorry.
It was coming above, or otherwise you can send to me. I can share with them.
Yeah. Okay.
I think someone has sent. How to find?
I just sent it to you by email.
Yeah, you can send to anything. I think someone has sent it in our group chat.
Okay.
Someone said. So yeah. So I think no one has some questions. So I have some questions, sir. So first of all, I want to ask that, like in Ukraine, there are so many patients now due to the war of depression and suffering from the Takotsubo syndrome, in which the depression caused the disorders in the cardiomyopathy. So is there any research is going on in TMS, whether the patient was treated about these disorders also?
In this particular area, I don't think so. But what I would normally recommend is that to focus on the like they always start in that case also with a standard depression protocol. Because we know that there's these DLPFC protocols that are the standard for depression. They're actually quite transdiagnostic, so they improve a lot of other symptoms as well, sleep disorders. They have effects on the they have even effects via the vagus nerve on, like, we saw heart decelerations. So we like all sorts of effects because the DLPFC is so well connected. So in the absence of a concrete protocol for such a concrete, let's say, case or comorbidity, I would always start with a standard depression protocol and see what additional benefits it creates.
Okay, so means there is some research is going on, but not particular on Takotsubo syndrome and that.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we see the evidence that it decreased the heart rate.
Yes.
As you tell. Okay.
Yes.
Second question about there are in our psychiatry department we have patients like which was not can't be treated by the pharmacology treatment, means it become the pharmacological resistant. So what about that? Means TMS can help those patients?
Yes, yeah, we have many of those patients as well, and then TMS is actually a perfect solution for those treatment-resistant patients. What we also see sometimes, but it's more anecdotal, is that that we had patients that were not responsive to pharmacotherapy, for example, SSRIs. And then after a successful TMS treatment, they became responsive to SSRIs. So even this could happen, that a successful TMS treatment could rewire or modify brain networks in such a way that you can then do like the maintenance with a low dose of pharmaco that was not successful before, but is now successful. We've seen these cases.
Okay, so it was good result. So that's my question. So I'm taking any more questions? Yeah. Yes, Siddhanta, please.
Good evening, sir. That was a great lecture, first of all. And I have a question. I've seen one this innovation or research product, you can say, Energize. It claims to stimulate the vagus nerve to like reduce and also to moderate the insular activities and reduce the hyperactivity in the amygdala, and it claims to reduce the stress levels in the body. How far is it true, and are there any side effects for prolonged usage of such technology, of like stimulating the vagus nerve again and again? It's a small device which can be put behind the ear, and it does the work.
Yeah, we've also done a study with that non-invasive vagus nerve stimulation with that ear clip.
Yeah.
And we've seen some positive effects in our case on memory performance in dementia. But for the rest, I would say that we are not really able to claim these things that you just claimed. It's just too experimental, and that's the bit the problem with these things, that you will find probably one study on every possible application that you can think of, and they find positive results, but scientifically that doesn't mean much, right? If one study on a few patients in one lab find something, that is not enough for us to make these claims. That's why I showed you those tables, and many disorders that you are interested in, including what you are just asking, were not on that table. And the reason is not that this was not investigated. The reason is that we as a scientific community have strict standards what we believe is scientific evidence, and that includes replication of the same effect in independent groups, a certain size of the investigated sample, certain control conditions. And this is and only if that is all achieved, there's a consensus. We call it a consensus that a particular protocol is effective. And what you just mentioned is not among those consensus protocols. So it's pure off-label experimental, maybe. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but there's no reason to claim that this is evidence-based.
Okay, so it means it may work on some people, it may not work on some people.
Yes.
Thank you,
We just
Doctor.
don't know yet. We need more data, and we need to come to consensus, which often takes time and takes replications and things like this. So it's always easy to claim something. And as I said, you can go on PubMed and you type in whatever disease and you will find a paper. Like there's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir.
So, any more questions from anyone for Dr. Alexander? I think no one. So thank you. So Dr. Alexander, I invite all of you guys for have a photo. I will take a screenshot for our photography. So I request you to, from all, to open the cameras. And yeah, I can see. Opening. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Actually, sir, today I invite from all of them. So there are so many big family of EMSA today are joining with us from different countries. They are joining from different countries.
Excellent.
So let's take a photo. Smile. Yeah, one. Great. So thank you everyone. Thank you, Professor Alexander, for such an insightful session. We hope we will conduct more session with you and with more TMS. And I think we have a better collaboration with you.
Wonderful. Thanks again for the invitation. I wish you all the best. And yeah, hopefully we see each other again in the future.
Yeah, sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. Take care. Goodbye.